What if everything you trusted, rules, power, even the very idea of safety, could be swept away in a single morning? Imagine waking before dawn on a seemingly ordinary day, only to find the world you knew reshaped in the space of a few hours. That is what unfolded before the sun rose on October 10, 2025, in Kyiv. The city was plunged into a darkness more profound than any blackout. Not just a loss of electricity, but the curtain rising on a global drama that no one, not even the sharpest analysts, had truly anticipated. Before the first alarm sounded in distant capitals, a meticulously coordinated strike was already underway, a move so audacious and technically sophisticated that it left military experts around the planet speechless. The West, long confident in its foresight, its technologies, and its lines of defense, was caught off guard. This was not merely a new battle. It was a deliberate demonstration. From this moment forward, the world would play by new rules. The aftershocks rippled outward, far past Ukraine's borders. The port of Odessa, a vital artery for global grain shipments and a key node in the world's food supply, was paralyzed. Ships idled at anchor. The world's food flows, crucial minerals, and energy supplies were suddenly in limbo. For millions in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, bread and cooking oil, staples of daily life, became uncertain commodities. In Europe, the supply of sunflower oil, wheat, and corn, much of it sourced from Ukraine, was thrown into question. Businesses from Cairo to Berlin found themselves unable to fulfill contracts as food prices began to rise on every continent. This was not the first time a single choke point had shaken the world. In 1956, when Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a brief closure sent shockwaves through Europe and beyond, leading to fuel shortages and economic chaos. But the Odessa shutdown was faster, more total, and its reach, thanks to interconnected supply chains, was even greater. In an era where just-in-time delivery governs everything from supermarkets to factories, the world learned just how fragile its systems truly were. Yet the most chilling revelation was not in the ports or the markets. It was the collapse of faith in the world's most trusted security systems. For decades, nations had invested billions of dollars and untold hopes in layered missile shields, cyber defense, and the promise of mutual deterrence. But in those dark hours in Kyiv, hundreds of sites were struck with precision by weapons that seemed to defy every known Western safeguard. Drones, flying low and silent, skirted around radar. Hypersonic missiles, once the stuff of military theory, became terrifyingly real, slipping through defensive nets as if they were not even there. It was not just a defeat of hardware. It was a psychological shock, a shattering of the comfortable illusion that technological superiority guaranteed safety. Suddenly, every nation, large or small, rich or poor, was forced to reckon with exposure to risks that ignored geography and precedent. The old boundaries had been erased. If you believe these dangers are limited to those in the conflict zone, think again. The tremors from Kyiv have already threatened your household budget, the food on your table, your energy bills, your job security, and the stability you have taken for granted. Just as the COVID pandemic revealed how an invisible threat could upend daily life across continents, so too did this strike expose the interconnectedness and the vulnerability of our modern existence. The shocks do not recognize borders, and they spare no one. So, what exactly happened on October 10th, and why does it matter for you, wherever you are in the world? To answer, we must look closely at the events of that morning, the scale, the technology, the intent, and the consequences that followed. Shortly before 4 o'clock in Kyiv, a sequence of attacks unfolded with breathtaking precision. In less than 15 minutes, hundreds of critical sites, power plants, substations, communication hubs, railway junctions, were hit simultaneously. This was not a random barrage. Each strike was chosen to maximize disruption and demonstrate the attacker's technological edge. The weapons used were rumored to be the latest generation of autonomous drones and hypersonic missiles, capable of evading even the most advanced Western air defense systems. Let us draw a historical parallel. In the opening hours of Operation Desert Storm in 1991, the world watched as United States cruise missiles knocked out Iraq's command centers and air defenses, ushering in a new era of precision warfare. Yet the technology on display in Kyiv in 2025 dwarfed even that. These new systems, perhaps using artificial intelligence to coordinate their flight paths and avoid detection, rendered decades-old defenses obsolete overnight. The world's military strategists found themselves, for the first time in decades, without a reliable playbook. Ukraine's energy grid was eviscerated. Within minutes, millions were left without heat, light, or communication. The port of Odessa, responsible for moving almost half of Ukraine's grain exports, was silenced. Grain silos stood full but useless, their contents unable to reach the ships that would carry them to world markets. The shockwaves hit not just the Ukrainian economy, but global food prices, energy markets, and shipping rates. Consider the global ripple effect. When a port like Odessa stops, it is not just local farmers who suffer. In 2022, a blockage in the Black Sea caused bread prices to spike in Lebanon and Egypt, leading to protests and unrest. The events of October 10th were far more severe. Supermarket shelves in Istanbul and Rome started to empty, and governments from Jakarta to Lagos convened emergency meetings to manage food security. Airlines rerouted flights as aviation fuel supplies grew uncertain. Even in the United States, wheat futures surged, and grocery chains began rationing staple items amid fears of shortages. Meanwhile, the financial world was thrown into turmoil. Investors, rattled by the scale and precision of the attacks, rushed to safe havens. Gold prices soared. The Russian ruble, despite sanctions, showed surprising resilience, buoyed by elevated oil and gas revenues. For the first time since the 1970s oil shocks, there was real talk among analysts of a new economic order, one where the United States dollar was no longer the unchallenged anchor of global trade. International organizations, normally quick to offer statements and emergency loans, appeared paralyzed. The United Nations Security Council met in emergency session, but the divisions were stark. The European Union, heavily reliant on Ukrainian grain and increasingly vulnerable to energy disruptions, struggled to coordinate a response. NATO, for all its military might, found itself facing a type of warfare it had not anticipated. A war waged not just with tanks and troops, but with algorithms, cyber sabotage, and relentless attacks on the infrastructure that underpins modern life. The implications were clear. October 10th was not just an escalation in Ukraine's war, but the opening gambit in a new era of global conflict. The old rules, deterrence, escalation management, red lines, had collapsed. In their place was a new logic. The side that could innovate fastest, strike suddenly, and exploit global interdependence would hold the upper hand. The West's response was revealing. Instead of swift, coordinated action, there was hesitation, finger-pointing, and confusion. Leaders issued strong statements, but behind closed doors, old alliances showed signs of strain. Some governments pushed for immediate military support. Others counseled restraint, warning that any misstep could spiral into a wider war. The ghost of the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 loomed large. A single miscalculation now could lead to catastrophe. Russia's intentions were unmistakable. The message was clear. Continued resistance would be impossible, or so costly as to be unthinkable. This was not just a threat to Ukraine, but a warning to every nation that had relied on old security assurances. The balance of power, so painstakingly maintained since the end of the Cold War, had shifted overnight. In Warsaw, in Berlin, in London, policymakers realized that the old certainties had vanished. Western credibility, once the bedrock of international trust, was visibly shaken. Alliances frayed, as some members questioned whether the mutual defense promises would hold in the face of such technological dominance. Trust in the ability of legacy powers to maintain order and protect their interests was eroding fast. The financial aftershocks were immediate. Stock markets from Tokyo to New York saw sharp declines. Investors shifted from riskier assets into gold, Swiss francs, and even cryptocurrencies. In Beijing, Moscow, and New Delhi, officials met behind closed doors to discuss the implications for their own economies and security. The flow of capital began to shift eastward. In the space of days, decades-old trading patterns and currency routes started to break down. For the first time in generations, there was talk of a multi-currency world, one where the United States dollar, the euro, and the Chinese yuan all vied for dominance. To ignore the scale of this upheaval is to risk your own future. Your savings, your investments, even your access to daily necessities like food and electricity could all be at stake. The comfort of the old order is gone. In this new world, survival demands adaptability. What comes next will test every assumption about power, security, and resilience. The stakes are not abstract. They are immediate and personal. History offers many warnings. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, few expected the Soviet Union to collapse within 2 years. When Lehman Brothers failed in 2008, the global economy teetered on the brink of depression. Disruption often comes quickly, and the unprepared pay the highest price. Analysts warn that the events of October 10th are merely the first tremors. In the coming weeks, global markets may see wild swings. Food prices could surge further, and inflation might worsen. Already stressed supply chains, from microchips to medicine, could snap in unexpected places. In 2021, a single ship, the Ever Given, stuck in the Suez Canal, delayed billions of dollars in trade. Imagine that scale of disruption, multiplied across dozens of critical bottlenecks from ports to pipelines. The economic story goes deeper. In capitals across the East, gold reserves have quietly reached historic highs. Many experts see this as part of a long-term strategy, to insulate their economies from Western sanctions and prepare for a new monetary order. If new financial blocs emerge, perhaps led by China, Russia, and their partners, the supremacy of the United States dollar could be challenged for the first time since Bretton Woods. Your savings, your pension, your mortgage, all suddenly exposed to risks that few had considered. Meanwhile, Russia has dropped its last diplomatic pretenses. Officials now declare openly that they will pursue their aims by any means necessary, including, perhaps, the use of new technologies that make traditional escalation controls obsolete. The threat of further escalation, once a shadow hanging over the region, is now a clear and present danger. Neighbors in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia are on high alert. The world watches nervously, aware that the line between conventional and unconventional warfare has blurred. Western nations are struggling to find unity. Some leaders call for decisive action, warning that inaction invites further aggression. Others urge caution, arguing that a miscalculation could lead to disaster. Without consensus, the West's ability to deter further conflict is slipping. The world watches as the alliances that underpinned global order for more than 70 years show signs of unraveling. Sanctions remain the West's main tool, but their effectiveness is in doubt. Elevated energy prices mean Russia continues to earn billions, blunting the pain of economic penalties. New trade corridors, like the North-South Transport Corridor linking Russia and Iran, offer alternatives to Western-controlled routes. The lesson is clear. Economic warfare alone may no longer suffice. Perhaps the most dangerous precedent is this. Attacks on critical infrastructure, power grids, pipelines, undersea cables, and digital networks are now weapons of influence for any state with the technical means. In 2015, a cyber attack took down Ukraine's power system for hours. In 2025, the scale was orders of magnitude greater. Every country now faces the reality that nothing is off-limits. The risk of copycat attacks, whether by states or non-state actors, is rising around the globe, from the South China Sea to the Persian Gulf, from the Arctic to the Straits of Hormuz. If escalation continues unchecked, the conflict could spill beyond Ukraine and Russia, entangling new actors. The danger of a wider, even global confrontation grows. The threat is no longer abstract. it has entered the daily lives of ordinary people everywhere. In Seoul, families stockpile rice. In Warsaw, small businesses invest in generators. In Cape Town, city leaders assess the security of their ports against cyber attack. Societies are being tested as never before. Will citizens unite in adversity, as Londoners did during the Blitz in World War II? Or will stress and division weaken nations from within, as happened in Yugoslavia in the early 1990s? The strength of communities and entire countries will be measured not just by armies, but by how people cope with disrupted routines, uncertainty, and daily hardship. Your cost of living, your employment, your sense of security, all are now in play. The ripple effects are spreading with unprecedented speed. To ignore them is to risk greater chaos and losses that could become deeply personal. The world stands on the edge of a new era, with every day bringing fresh uncertainty. What happens next may decide the future for years, even decades to come. The post-Cold War order, painstakingly assembled over generations, now teeters on the brink of dissolution. Adaptation now outranks panic as the true currency of survival and influence. After that October 10th shock in Kyiv, the world's old certainties vanished. The rules have changed, everywhere and for everyone. In this new era, agility and foresight are not luxuries. They are lifelines for protecting your home, your finances, and even your sense of normalcy. What once felt stable can unravel in a single night. Never assume that energy grids, food prices, or financial systems will remain reliable. Take the example of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria in 2017. The entire island's power grid collapsed, and it took months, some places more than a year, to restore basic services. In our interconnected world, a distant shock can have the same effect as a natural disaster at home. Those who act first, who anticipate and stay nimble, are better positioned to shield themselves and those they care about from sudden shocks. Diversification is no longer just prudent advice, it is necessary. Depending on a single supply chain, energy provider, or financial market is a risk you simply cannot afford. Spread your investments. Seek out alternative suppliers for critical goods. Build redundancy into your household and your business. Information is your armor. Mainstream news will only show part of the story. To see the whole picture, reach out to a variety of sources, including perspectives from Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. During the early days of the pandemic, those who paid close attention to reports from China and Italy were able to prepare earlier than those who waited for official reassurances. Knowledge, more than any asset, can give you an edge. Do not accept empty reassurances from leaders. Push for detailed plans, real preparations, and tangible action. Hold decision-makers accountable so your community is not caught unprepared, merely hoping things will improve. Demand transparency about critical infrastructure, emergency supplies, and contingency plans. Strengthen your immediate environment. Support local supply chains. Build neighborhood networks. Share practical skills, like first aid, food preservation, and basic repairs. A resilient community increases everyone's odds of surviving disruption. In Japan, after the 2011 tsunami, neighbors who knew each other and had plans in place fared far better than those who did not. Watch how the world responds, especially in Asia and the Middle East. The choices made in Beijing, Riyadh, and New Delhi over the coming months could redraw alliances, shift markets, and alter the global balance. Their ripple effects will reach your doorstep, no matter where you live. The pace of change is only accelerating. Defense, markets, and alliances are all in flux. Do not wait for normalcy to return. Adapt early, anticipate the next wave, and move before events force your hand. The risk is stark. Adapt now, and you safeguard your wealth, your safety, and your influence. Ignore reality, and you risk loss, instability, or irrelevance. The choice now is urgent. Which future will you claim? In the coming moments, your decisions and your mindset will shape whether you merely endure these changes or emerge stronger. The next step is to act before the window closes. The rules have changed. Waiting is no longer an option. What erupted in Kyiv on October 10, 2025 was not just another act of aggression, it was a signal that shattered old certainties about warfare and safety. One morning's devastation in Ukraine exposed how fragile global stability truly is. If you think this is far away, you are wrong. The shockwaves from that day reach every border, disrupting energy flows, spiking food prices, and rattling the foundations of the global economy faster than any headline can warn you. The era of assumed safety is over. Clinging to yesterday's models will only leave you exposed. The real danger is not only what has changed, but failing to act while you still can. This is your wake-up call. Complacency now means missing your chance to adapt, to protect your assets, your livelihood, your family's future. Each decision you make from here shapes your security and your prosperity. So ask yourself, now that the masks are off and the stakes are real, what will you change? What will you demand from your leaders, your community, and yourself? History is not waiting. The critical moment is now, and it belongs to those who choose to act.